Welcome to Toronto. My first time. I really enjoy it. My name is Hayden. I'm at the Jito Foundation. I do a bunch of BD, but most focus on the restaking protocol. And today I'm going to talk about Tiprooter, which is something that we developed on the restaking protocol, and then an upcoming upgrade that we're going to be implementing to Tiprooter in the coming month. But before that, probably dig into a little bit of the history of the way rewards on Solana have transpired, and sort of why the precedent for Tiprooter is only growing. Here's some disclosures for our Canadian folk. Okay, so up until 2024, inflation was the only sort of source for yield on Solana. And for those that aren't really familiar with the way this works, it's typically like L1 chains. They have two sources of, yield. One is from consensus layer rewards. These are like the base layer inflation rewards that you are going to emit to validators and stakers to participate in your network. And this was the only set of yield that existed on Solana before 2024. And then the other half of the equation is execution layer rewards. These are rewards that are sort of paid to the chain because there's something valuable happening on chain, whether it's an NFT mint, it's some on-chain arbitrage, potentially it's like a centralized exchange, decentralized exchange arbitrage, and so these are the fees that traders or users are paying to update state. Up until 2024, again, I'll say it one more time, the only type of reward that validators and stakers were benefiting from were consensus layer rewards. And then the Jito network launched Jito Solana. It was an extra sort of transaction lane where users and traders could sort of express their willingness to pay for some type of state. And since then, the execution layer rewards have grown. And so today, something that has developed is this notion of REV. It's something that we think is very real. And for those who don't know what REV stands for real economic value. It's basically a way to measure the value or the demand for updating some type of state on a chain. Typically, it consists of two types of fees. One are the native fees, very common amongst other L1 chains or all L1 chains. And then there's, at least in Solana's case, also Ethereum's case, this sort of out of protocol sort of mechanism where traders and users could, express some type of preference, pay a higher fee, pay a tip, so that you can include your transactions in a way that will land your transactions faster and give you better transaction execution guarantees. Jito tips make up over 50% of this. And so this is just kind of a chart of, showing how, vibrant the execution side of the chain has grown. I think last year, the total amount of REV, I want to say, don't quote me on this, around 800 million. I think so far to date, we're eclipsing maybe 500 million. So probably more, honestly. The last time I checked, it was around 400 million, and that was at some point in April. So we're already set to sort of eclipse the amount of REV that existed last year. And this is the way it flows in 2024. You can't really see, I don't know, it's kind of blurry up here. But on the left-hand side, you have your your sources of revenue for the chain. So the top one is Jito tips. The middle one is priority fees, and then some combination of base and base fees. But as you can see, they're not very voting fees and base fees. They're very small. The primary drivers of REV are priority fees and Jito tips. So Jito tips, a bunch of the value flows to stakers. And the reason for this is because one, Jito Sol. If you stake with Jito Sol, the delegation for that SOL is managed or facilitated by StakeNet, which is this on-chain decentralized sort of framework that automatically delegates Jito Sol stake across a validator set of 200. One of the sort of metrics that StakeNet looks at in order to determine which validators to delegate their stake is MEV commission. So if you charge more than X% on your MEV, you're not going to get any Jito stake. So StakeNet is a way to sort of incentivize sharing your MEV tips with stakers. Another reason why Jito tips flows to stakers, is because there are a lot of application developers that just like have their own node. They're running their own node, but it's not their core business. Their core business isn't to be a node operator. And so it just makes sense from a marketing perspective and also for their users to, if you stake with Drift, if you stake with Helios, they're just going to, drop their MEV commission rate to 0 and share all of those tips with their stakers. The middle, as you can see, priority fees, it's split. And this is in 2024 again. Half of it went to validators, and then half of it was burned. And so implicitly, stakers were able to benefit from this burn. And that's the way priority fees have been distributed in 2024. But things are changing. So just recently, the fee burn is gone, like SIMD 0096 effectively eliminated fee burn. So now validators are able to sort of benefit 100% from priority fees. Something else that's probably going to change, I kind of mentioned it in the previous talk, inflation is likely to go down. In fact, I think it's imminent. SIMD 228 was a proposal raised by Multicoin, which basically sort of like argued that we're paying too much for economic security. Solana has this other source of revenue called REV. We don't need to spend so much money on inflation. Even though it didn't pass, there's already round 2 that's kickstarted. Galaxy just posted another SIMD to sort of like get the ball rolling in this direction. So in my opinion, it's a matter of when, not if. Just have to come to terms on the right mechanism. Something else that's happening is the yield is getting more volatile. So just by the nature of the way you can capture this sort of like economic activity as a validator is proportional to the amount of stake you have. So if you have 3% stake on the network, you'll be the leader 3% of the time. If you don't have 3% of the network, let's say you have less than 1% of the network, the amount of times you're able to profit or at least like benefit from the economic activity goes lower, and your volatility picks up. And so that's what we're seeing just with economic activity on Solana. And then there's finally the last one, which is this pending in protocol block rewards SIMD. This was passed. I'm not sure when that's going to get shipped, but there's going to be a native way for Solana to, or for validators to, sort of like share some of those priority fees with their stakers. Something that like we'll get into is how we're building sort of an upgrade to Tiprooter, which is going to be effectively the same thing as SIMD 123, which we'll get into the details of in a bit. So again, like this is kind of what it looks like. Solana doesn't really have like native ways to sort of like distribute the value that it creates to stakers. Validators can sort of like pick how much inflation they want to share. This is your classic validator commission. Nothing's enforced. There isn't really an incentive to share validator stake with your validators, especially if you're like a large sort of like business with a great brand. They could basically charge whatever they want. Again, there's no in-protocol way to incentivize this sharing mechanism. Same thing with Jito tips. At least like if you're running Jito Solana and you don't necessarily care about receiving Jito Sol delegations, you might charge 100% commission on your MEV. And then finally, priority fees. Again, there's no native way. And we're thinking of ways in how we could start to build infrastructure to allow validators and stakers to express the way they want to redistribute this value and also delegate their stake. And so for inflation, I mean, the first one's straightforward. We developed StakeNet. It's been running. It's been live for over a year. This is sort of the on-chain sort of framework that delegates Jito Sol stake. I think right now the number for that is 10%. So if you're charged more than 10% on your inflation commission, it could be 5. Don't quote me on it. You can check the website. I'm at the booth over there. I can show you. You won't get any Jito Sol stake. So all the Jito Solana validators, which right now, or all the validators that are getting Jito Sol stake, there's about 200 of them. All of them have this inflation commission lower than this number that we create. By we, I mean the DAO. The DAO is able to sort of adjust the parameters on StakeNet. Jito tips, the way that Jito tips are distributed is through a combination of StakeNet and Tiprooter. For StakeNet, there's this separate parameter that's also accounted for. It's the MEV commission rate. And then Tiprooter is the protocol that distributes this value across the network. And something that like is in progress of getting shipped over the next coming month is this upgrade to Tiprooter, which is going to allow validators to share priority fees with their stakers. And this is something that's really important. One, because it's a way that stakers could express like who they want to. It gives stakers another lever for deciding who they want to delegate their stake to. I think like right now, like we're still at this phase where in general, like L1s are fairly immature when it comes to things like MEV. So on one end, we're developing MEV infrastructure to sort of make these things much more efficient and transparent. On the other end, we're creating levers that stakers who ultimately provide stake to these validators a way to sort of say, I'm going to use my stake for the greater good. If you're doing this, I'm not going to stake it with you. If you're doing this, I'm going to stake it with you. And so, this is sort of the reason why we're thinking about how to sort of create infrastructure for distributing priority fees. So Tiprooter is again, it's the protocol that's going to facilitate all this value. It decentralizes a key function of the Jito network. This is the MEV tip distribution. For those who aren't familiar, before Tiprooter, Labs was sort of trusted to delegate, to sort of like calculate the correct MEV tip distribution across like Solana validators and stakers. Tiprooter now Tiprooter now involves 13 node operators. All of them are like very, very good Solana operators. Now 13 node operators are generating this correct tip distribution and contributing to an on-chain quorum for how these tips are going to be distributed. So this is the way it looks. Again, sorry, the font's kind of, I can't really read it, but again, there's a set of node operators. They're running this client. The client's basically taking a snapshot of the chain at the last slot of every epoch. That snapshot, they're going to pull basically like the state of all validator accounts and stake accounts. This snapshot will be used to sort of determine the allocation of MEV tips. 13 node operators are running this client. They'll, get the result and submit the Merkle root of that result to an on-chain ballot box. The on-chain ballot box is counting all of these votes, you could say. And once this contract achieves greater than 66% quorum on the same Merkle root, then MEV tips can be distributed. And then, all these validators can, claim the MEV tips that were distributed via the Jito network. And the fee distributions are, some validation stakers get it, the Jito DAO gets some of it, and then all the NCM participants also benefit from participating in Tiprooter. And so this Tiprooter upgrade is going to basically just like be a little bit of an addition where we could use the same exact logic to now capture a distribution of priority fees. There's a little bit of a different type of infrastructure on the back end, but for the user, you're basically just going to be able to like capture priority fees. And if you're a validator, you could decide to run Tiprooter or at least use Tiprooter to sort of organize like that fee distribution. And so in addition to this upgrade, there's going to be another sort of metric that StakeNet will use to determine who gets Jito Soul Stake. So again, this is a way that if you want to participate in Jito Soul Stake delegation as a validator, you're going to have to share some of your MEV tips with your stakers. So again, there aren't any really in-protocol ways that Solana incentivizes this like redistribution. We're thinking about how to build that infrastructure for stakers. When it's coming soon, I think over the next month it'll be rolled out. So stay tuned. And the really cool part about all of this is that it's all built on the restaking protocol. I thought about like putting this in the beginning, but what happens is when I talk about restaking, everyone's eyes glaze over. So I put it at the end. So now that you're interested in Tiprooter and how it works, and this is really cool, I'm gonna get some priority fees. Believe it or not, it's all built on a restaking protocol. And the restaking protocol in general is a way that you can decentralize a network. You can decentralize your whole network. You could decentralize a component of your network. That's exactly what we're doing. We're using the Jito restaking protocol to decentralize this tip distribution. So effectively, you could build mini Solanas on Solana. You could use the Solana runtime to sort of like facilitate some type of arbitrary proof of stake mechanism. And yeah, the reason why is because as the Jito network grows, as Solana gets more mature, not only are we going to benefit from having the framework to decentralize components of the Jito stack, because we are also sort of like developing on Solana, we expect at some point for other developers and applications on Solana to think about how to decentralize components of their stack. And so if you're one of those, feel free to talk with me, hit me up on Twitter. My tag is magicdhz. And maybe you're not at a point where you want to decentralize, but at some point it's on the roadmap. I get that feedback a lot. Still, feel free to reach out. Right now we're working closely with a few teams to sort of learn about what kinds of features or templates or whatever could get them started and hit the ground running once they do start to think about shipping different ways to decentralize their network. And so, yep, that's all I got today. Thanks again. And like I said in the beginning, if you have any restaurants recommendations for me while I'm in Toronto, please let me know. Okay, thanks everyone.